It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, because the day was such a bright white outside. She stood, her solid little feet bare against the forest earth. Somehow, I knew her lack of shoes was because she liked to feel the world rather than any deprivation. Her pinafore was white and clean and glowed like bone against the shade. She was the shiniest, brightest thing I'd ever seen, and my heart leapt, and I was ashamed of my filth that I hadn't even noticed until now. When she smiled, her teeth somehow put me in mind of pips when a ripe fruit is cut open. The day, the week, my whole life sharpened into this one point. Her face and the brightness of it. "I'm Flora," she said at last. "Why are your clothes so broken?" I looked down, shame blooming on me, because it was true. The road had worn them down, and the stitching on my shoes had unravelled in places, showing a toe as cold and grey as a snail. And there was her, so beautiful she shone. "Don't trouble yourself to answer." She laid her hand on my arm. "I didn't mean any offence. Tell me instead your age." "I'm 9 or 10, or possibly even 11. I was sorry then I'd said 9, because I was fairly sure I wasn't as young as that. 11 would have been better." "You don't know your age?" She laughed. But it wasn't a harsh laugh, and I found myself laughing with her at the absurdity of not knowing the amount of years you have under your belt. We stood together and talked like this for a while. There was the strangest sense of time flowing quicker than it should. I could only confirm it by seeing how the shadows of the trees had moved, as if they'd speeded up when we weren't looking. We walked up and down too, sometimes in silence. Only the walking felt more like flying. I felt touched by something I'd never been touched by before. The hand of God, even. I needed to test it out, to see if she felt the same. I reached down and picked some grasses. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm making a ring for you," I said, hardly believing my own boldness. When the plait was done, I slipped the little green thing onto her finger, and she held it up so she could admire it. "I need to go now," she said, "but will I meet you here again?" I nodded, with a certainty that I didn't feel, for my life was a scattered one that didn't unfold just in one place. I returned to the mill pond a different boy. I performed a quick scout about for my father and saw he wasn't there. But even before that, I was barely worried. Fear could hardly leave a scratch on me, because some kind of light had got inside. It pushed its way into every bit of my being, even down into the strands of hair, and the feeling of it was so warm and pure it felt like my whole life, and the way it was set to turn out, could be changed entirely. I found the flattened bit of grass where I was sitting before, and I sat there, hoping that Father could have no way of knowing I'd even budged from the spot. How changed and golden everything was. The autumn colours of the trees burned, and the mill pond was still and creamy, like a pail of milk. All I could think of was the wonderfulness of Flora, how I needed to see her again. It formed a sort of desperation in me, the want to make this true and not knowing if I could ever make it happen. I sat in my little grass armchair, wondering if my father would see the change in me on his return, and hoping he wouldn't. He was the sort to take any bright thing he saw in another's possession to either keep it for himself or crush it entirely. I'll never know if this was the terror that let it in, this fever of feelings. It perhaps skewed the world, and things ceased running on the common lines. At first, my poor brain could not understand what was so unnatural about the figure who came towards me. It was not that his coat was shabby, or the hat pulled down so low over his face his eyes were all darkness. It wasn't even the fact that, clamped in his mouth, was a pipe that ended in a burning bowl bigger than any baccy pipe could ever be. It plumed out clouds of smoke,